Well, hello, audience, and welcome back to the Arcane Archive. Yes, sir, today we have another incredible arousing, astounding selection of just salaciously delicious stories and tales for you today, here with Cautionary Chronicles. That's right, we are back. We have quite the selection here today. In fact, a little bit special since this is all purely from my personal choices. Sammy has yet to have actually seen any of these, as he's kind of coming in from a bit of his personal errands and stuff that he had to do. And so this is going to be extra fun for all of us because we get to see his real-time reactions to all of these.
Well, you had to do it last week, so
that's true. That is fair. So that
now.
being the case, we figured we'd switch it up. Turnabout's fair play. I'm gonna start off this first one though, since I felt like fair enough. We want to give him at least a little time to adjust. That being the case, as always, please be sure to like and comment down below on the video. Let us know kind of what you guys are thinking about these stories or anything else. If you guys have any ideas or thoughts of maybe some topics you want us to cover at all on the channel, subscribing and sharing also helps us out immensely, and we're ever so grateful for any support that you can offer. Thank you all again so very much. And without further ado, let's go ahead and let's dive back down into the archive. The first story of the day is titled, "Oh, so I'm a S-slave now." Cool. Just a bit of a slight essay warning for everybody, just as a trigger, as a heads up. All right, so this happened a few years back when I was in a college tabletop group. There was one particular GM who ran games for most of the group who we'll call George for this story. Anyways, I'm preparing for my first game with him, rolling character stats, figuring out my backstory, stuff like that, you know? According to George, I'd be jumping in to replace another player who had been team killed for being a constant thorn in the side of the other players. Right? Already maybe a bit of a red flag there, but we'll see. These players will be going to the Kinku Republic, or as George described it, Bird Russia.
I love that.
Where my character would be introduced. So I go Aarakocra Artificer and talked at length with the GM about how my character could own a gun store and how he could work with the ruling government, all that good stuff. Well, come my first game, and I'm told by George to wait while he gets everything ready for my character introduction. The party enters the main palace and meet the ruler, who offers them an assistant on the quest they're about to take for him. And instead of the introduction George and I had already worked out, my character was instead dragged out in front of the other party members, feathers torn out and severely malnourished, with his legs and arms bound. This was not at all what we had agreed upon. George, however, decided to not tell me that Aarakocra were in fact considered second-class citizens here, and that the ruler had taken my character for his own, personal uses. Not a great start. Not a great start. The game continues. My new party taking my character and leaving the palace. They decide to stop in town to shop and restock when out of nowhere, we are all asked to roll saves. Apparently, the Aarakocra Rebellion has decided to go off, and they are going to have a magically enforced march in the capital city, and never guess who auto-failed the saving throw. Oh, and don't worry about my character with being seen or not, as a photograph was taken with my character marching front and center. So now I'm being hunted by law enforcement. The party appropriately reacting with grabbing my character and running like hell out of the city. Said party, however, decides to continue with the mission, finding the rebel HQ. Easily findable in the woods next to the capital, of course. And as we travel through the woods, we're attacked, and I'm told by the party to hang back and hide, as my character is still weak from being, imprisoned. Well, George springs a new and awesome, his words, mechanic, where whenever a party member is in an enclosed space, they need to roll a Constitution saving throw. Just so happens to also be my weakest stat. I fail, of course, and George then proceeds to tell me, Your character has been teleported into a pocket dimension where he is tormented by his worst nightmares and memories and cannot escape unless someone else lets him out. Suffice it to say, I did not return for session 2. End post. So overall there you see, not really like any explicit kind of telling of kind of abuse or anything, but still yeah, very clear. I feel like this GM had like a personal kind of shit towards the OP or something. Like I don't even understand. Like, like you'd think if a player's gonna pick a so-called race that you know for a fact are treated as second-class citizens in an area where they're apparently from, the GM might inform them of that, as well as the whole doing an automatic just random, oh, there's an Arakocra rebellion that's happening, and your character just auto fails, and they are apparently eliciting or initiating a magically enforced march.
Yeah, there's a couple weird things in here that I'm just like, okay, okay. The march is one thing, like if there's some sort of artifact or big thing, like fine. But the weird enclosed space make a con save, which it would make more sense if they would like panic and try to get out and like especially being a
but even
character
like
that was
what?
imprisoned and abused, like, you could make an argument for if you did this the right way, it would be like, well, you're in an enclosed space, this reminds you of shit you've dealt with before, make a wisdom save or some sort of save, and if you fail, your character starts freaking out and maybe people hear you, right? Because that was like the problem with that. But not, oh, you get teleported to a pocket dimension where you're tortured until someone lets you out. Like that doesn't make any fucking
I mean,
sense.
well, also though, he's saying literally whenever a party member, and he's saying it's a new and awesome mechanic, which leads me to assume that it wasn't implemented before this moment. Then, and they're also given the inclination that it's again just whenever any party member is there, and then they're just like,
oh yeah, I didn't say it was a good mechanic, but
oh,
you
no,
could
no, no,
you
no,
could
no.
you could make a version of this that makes more sense.
I completely agree with, like, if you have experienced trauma, or even like for instance like Storm from the X-Men, right?
Yeah.
She has claustrophobia. She hates being stuck in small enclosed spaces. They make her freak out and she starts to kind of break down. And like, yeah, having like certain traits and stuff like that, I think makes your character far more dynamic, interesting, and gives you way more like role play opportunity and can be super fun and interesting overall. This, however, of course, is just, again, everything that's happened here, it seems almost like the GM has something against OP and is just like literally just doing everything they can just to fuck with them to the umpteenth extent. Like just like,
oh, definitely.
It's just like everything. Like I'm like, dude, what's happening, bro? Like, like even one of the comments down here literally asked, he's like, what the F? Did you kill this guy's father or something? Like, and then OP goes, I have no clue what his deal was. Like everyone else liked him. Like, honestly, I would have also said, like, dude, he should have just left in the middle of session 1. Like as soon as his character was brought out as being an apparent S-slave, like I'm like against his will, that was not something that we talked about at all. I'd be like, yeah, no, that doesn't happen. That's not what happens. That's not at all what my character's backstory was. And you can't just say that it was out of nowhere. Like, screw off. Like, no, that's ridiculous. I do not know exactly like what it is about like people wanting to like use D&D as a means of like fantasy revenge kind of thing, right? I guess maybe it comes back to the same kind of idea of, a lot of people use D&D as just fantasy wish fulfillment overall. Yeah. And I guess that's obviously where it comes back to. I guess that in that sense, it does make sense. And that it's just like, I don't know, maybe this guy, like maybe this guy likes somebody who likes him or something, or I don't know. I am unsure of exactly what this shit is or where this is coming from, but it clearly seems like the GM was just deliberately targeting OP and just giving him the business in every possible way he could. But overall, like, yeah, it's I think that's probably about all we can really say about this. It is Hang on a minute, actually. OP maybe put another comment. He says, Part 2 is when I was elected to the group's board. They desperately needed a treasurer. It was mandatory for all board members to participate in George's D&D podcast. You'll never guess why episodes beyond the first never made it to YouTube. Holy shit. Uh, all right. I mean, if I'm intrigued now. I don't know if there is a part 2 somewhere, but maybe if there is, we can check that out too. But for now, let's go ahead. Let's move on to the next story of the day. Sammy, go ahead and take it away.
All right. For our second story, we have wasn't allowed back because my character was, quote, too secretive.
I'm interested to kind of hear this from your point of view too.
Yeah.
I was interested in this story for a lot of the discussion kind of behind it. But go ahead.
Yeah. From Big Ounce the Hobo, which great name. Love that personally.
I was a big fan of that too.
The cast, me, Paladin, problem player, the Barbarian, problem player 2, and the DM. There were others, but they aren't too important to the story and were just kind of bystanders. So I've been playing with the DM, cast me, then the Paladin, then the Barbarian. Okay, I missed that, sorry.
Yeah, so
I've
it's
been
him,
playing,
Paladin, problem player, yeah.
I'd been playing with the DM, Paladin, and one other for about a year before the events of this story, and we all had a good friendship going on. The Paladin player was a little averse towards me, but it was widely known that he didn't appreciate me talking with his boyfriend, quote the DM, for extended periods of time after the session. After the campaign where I met them, the DM decided to start a homebrew, isekai-style campaign with a bunch of kingdoms and political intrigue. The works. It was really well made, and I agreed to join in on it as the rest of the group did. The Paladin asked if a friend of his, the Barbarian, could join, and we were all fine because what could possibly go wrong? Session 0 rolls around, and I introduced my character as a true neutral genie warlock who made his way as an exotic dancer and kept his pre-isekai life a secret because he was ashamed of who he was back then. The end of the session was after a huge fight in a magic train where my character decided he was going to not fight with a bunch of strangers and instead snuck up to the first class car and chilled inside one of the rooms for the rest of the ride to their destination. This did not sit well with the Paladin or the Barbarian, but the rest of the players were fine with it since there really wasn't much space to fight anyways, and most of the players and the DM said they were okay with a non-good aligned character who kind of just did whatever, as long as I didn't actively put the party in danger. Okay, so it sounds like there's some talking, there's some communication as to whether or not this kind of thing is okay.
So far, it starts out relatively reasonable, all things considered.
Yeah, it's not terrible. Fast forward a few sessions with nothing of note happening, and my character once again decides to sort of dip from what's going on, not combat, to do his own thing. At this point, we are high enough in level that I had taken an aspect of the moon feature so my character can just do stuff without having to go to sleep. This mostly consisted of meditation, talking with his patron, and just general shenanigans that ended in many laughs for most of the party, except, of course, the Paladin and the Barbarian, who hated that my character would never tell them what he was up to the night prior, but were completely okay with another character actively doing drugs. Several more sessions go by, and I start to notice the hate towards my character is getting to such a point that the DM is having trouble keeping his own anxiety over it in check. So I talk with him about retiring the character in favor of a more straightforward and honest character. He agrees, and I roll up a fighter for the next session, where he will be introduced. On the session of his introduction, my character proceeds to absolutely demolish the boss encounter, mostly by himself, while singing the praises of his new allies. He truly shone as the beacon of hope and strength I had made him to represent. Though I always made sure to try my best to keep the others in the spotlight so as not to come off as main character syndrome guy. After some time, I noticed that the Paladin and Barbarian were still getting on my case about my character being a little too reserved, and I even apologized for it and made an effort to interact with the party on every occasion that presented itself without being overbearing, and it all seemed to work for a time. Unfortunately, I discovered that their problem was not with my characters, but with me instead. Anytime I wanted to do something or even suggested an alternate plan, the Paladin and Barbarian quickly shot me down, and we had to do their plan, even if it was too dangerous for the party to do. We barely made it out of so many encounters that should have been easy to resolve because Paladin and or the Barbarian came up with some harebrained scheme over my characters who had military training and a leadership role versus two random guys who had barely seen combat before the events of the campaign. I eventually talked to the two of them with the DM present to try and hash out what their deal was with me and to see if it could be resolved, which basically boiled down to we will try to be better about it. Unfortunately, I had to move shortly after that, so I gave the players and DM a notice beforehand so it wouldn't be sudden, as I would be unable to communicate for a time. Once I get set up in my new place. I attempted to rejoin, but it never seemed to be the right time. So I just sat in on a few of the sessions, hoping the next one would be the one I would be reintroduced in. No such luck. I talked to the DM and he said he had felt comfortable with the current number of players, so he would let me know when he's ready to bring it back up to include me again. He even told me that he missed having my character around. Several months passed, and I lost hope of ever coming back to the campaign when I noticed that they had added a new player. I had never left the Discord since I still talked to a lot of them there, without telling me, and I just hoped I wouldn't noticed. I talked to the DM and asked him if he had a problem with me specifically since I saw that he had added another player instead of talking to me to bring me back in. And he told me that it was because my character was too reserved, even though I had rectified that issue long ago. I am still convinced that the Paladin and Barbarian were the ones who convinced him not to bring me back in, since they were the only ones who took an issue with my characters and me, even after I made a clear effort to appease them specifically. And unfortunately, the DM is too shy and nervous to stand up to either of them, especially his boyfriend. Am I in the wrong here, or was this just doomed from the start?
So I'm interested in kind of what did you kind of get from
So
this
like
whole post
it it
first?
it definitely sort of started out like I could definitely see at the beginning them not liking the way that he ran his character, and I honestly kind of don't disagree.
Hmm.
If I had to be honest, the whole like just leaving in the middle of a combat or leaving in the middle
Yeah,
of like a party activities, I think is a bit toxic.
yeah. I mean, definitely
The
leaves a bit of a
point
sour
the
taste, I would
point
say. Yeah.
of D&D is to be collaborative. You don't have to be present for every single fucking thing, but if the party is doing an activity and without talking with anyone, without going over anything, you just decide I'm gonna leave
I
on
mean,
a whim.
especially if it's combat, like that's,
Yeah, especially if it's combat.
it's just,
To me,
yeah.
that's a red flag. I will say, and I'm not, I don't want to say that this guy is a liar
Hmm.
or is maybe underblowing or like overstating or understating things, but like this person also seems kind of have a little bit of a main character syndrome issue. It's hard.
I
It's
kind of
hard
agree.
because
Like,
they very eloquently explained what happened, and I don't want to put them
or at
down
least, you know,
from their
from their
perspective.
perspective, yeah.
Now, there
Hmm.
is some red flags there with like specifically those two other people being like, "Well, we don't like your character," but like nobody else seemed to have a problem with it. The DMs didn't seem to care, but
At
these
least
two
not
guys at
at
the table
first.
were like,
Like, yeah,
"Well," but that's what I mean. I definitely
yeah.
think these two guys are probably the most forward personalities in the group, which leads to them being the decision makers of a lot of things, which is not great.
Not
It's not really how
always.
it's supposed to be, but despite, if I take this at its word, and this person had a bad character, but listened to the feedback and created a
Mhm.
better character that he unfortunately ended up overshadowing the party, not on purpose, it seems like. It just seems like he knew what he was doing and built an effective character. If I'm taking it at its word,
Hmm.
at its best, this group is an asshole. These people are assholes for not just being honest,
Yeah,
because
for
the
not just
reality
coming
is
out.
we've talked about this before. Just kick them from the group if you don't like them. And
Yeah.
those of you who are being kicked out, like you kind of just have to take it on the chin. There's nothing you can like if a group of people is okay with you not playing with them anymore, there's nothing you're going to be able to do to fix that, realistically
Not,
speaking,
yeah,
because you're just
not,
kind of delaying the
it's highly
inevitable.
unlikely. Like, it's
So
just,
you'd be better off finding your another group to work with. It
yeah.
sucks. It's not anything I want to ever experience, although I'm sure it'll happen one day. Who knows? But you know, on the like the best I can take this, they didn't deserve to get ousted like this. The worst I can take this is that they are also a problem.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that they were removed, not just because people are petty assholes. It's a
Yeah.
little weird because the longer I read it, there's like little bits where I'm just like,
That's I mean that's exactly kind of the way I felt too. Like, even just like, again, OP, if you ever see this, like, we're not trying to bag on you. We're not kind of trying to just like, right, like, again, I'm just gonna say, like, right off the bat, it is definitely true, at least in my opinion. I think Sam also agrees. You come off as a little bit holier than thou, or maybe a little bit arrogant, a little bit like, even the way that you put it, like with your new like fighter character, where you were just like, he truly shone as the beacon of hope and strength that I had made him to represent. Oh, though I always made sure to try my best to keep others in the spotlight, of course. So I was come off as like main character syndrome guy.
yeah.
It's like, you kind of throw that in at the end because you maybe recognize that like what you just said there is like, it's a little like, again, just the fact that it's just like, oh yeah, he basically demolishes the boss encounter like mostly by himself, and while singing the praise of his new allies. It's like, okay, like I get it as a fighter. Yeah, maybe you did, roll up a particularly effective fighter that is really good at fighting. We've talked about that. Fighters are great and they're great at fighting. But even before, like when you're just like, the barbarian and paladin are still getting on your case, but being a little too reserved, which again, that definitely seems weird that they would do that because it sounds like you're making your character be much more extroverted. Um,
Yeah, I do definitely
and
think if, especially since they kept complaining about how reserved this person was, you weren't a good fit. That's just the
I
reality.
mean,
Like
that or they
reading this,
obviously they were using that as an excuse, right? That's how it kind of comes
but it
back
might
that they
also be
were
true. Like we've
maybe.
said this before that sometimes people aren't a fit for a group or a fit for a
Oh,
table.
I agree.
And like,
I do think OP just wasn't a good fit for this group.
no,
No matter what the full truth of the story is, whether maybe there's some other things going on that we don't know about, or if these guys really were just kind of petty assholes for some reason, like they
yeah.
because obviously OP also prefaces at the top that they GM and Paladin had been playing for about a year before any of this happened, and that
Mhm.
Paladin apparently already kind of had something against them for talking to their boyfriend for too long of a time. So I
Which is
mean,
also a perspective that is unique to the single person writing this story,
yep, it
which is the
is. It's
problem.
true.
Like,
Yeah, you
the
got to take
more
it
we
with a
read
grain of salt,
this,
of course. It's just there are a lot of indicators here
that maybe
that
this wasn't the best player either.
yeah, that OP maybe, is maybe not as aware of maybe certain things. Like I said, absolutely at the start too, like having a character that is so just kind of doing their own thing all the time without really engaging with the party too much. Yeah, that I agree as well. That can be kind of frustrating and annoying when you're just like, okay, you're off doing your own thing all the time. Or if you're,
Yeah.
I also personally, I have a personal thing about characters like dipping in combat, where you're just like, you don't
Ooh.
contribute in combat, even though it's like this is a thing that everybody could die from. You're like, if you actually care, if your character actually cares about these characters, which spoiler alert, you should, your character like should care about the safety of these characters, whether or not you care about the characters themselves like in a personal thing. It's still just like, okay, you have to have a reason why you're with the party, right? And a reason why you want the party to succeed and survive. That
Yeah.
is just a bar none absolutely vital aspect for any character or player to have. You
That's
have
the
to have that.
basics. That's the
And
basics.
running away in a fight, I don't, even if you're like a coward, like like here's the thing. I've played a cowardly character, or a character who's kind of like, a very nervous character before, right? Do it, but it's even more fun to like do it in a way where you're still contributing, where you're just like you're just like, you pretend to fire while you're like kind of flinching away, but
Yeah.
then you roll good and you end up like taking somebody out, and your character just be like, oh my god, oh I killed him, oh geez, like just you can do it, but still in a way that's contributing to the party. Like, don't just because then why is your character even an adventurer to begin with? You
Yeah. I
know?
mean, there's also, you could just play a character that buffs or debuffs or
Yeah.
does
If you
control
don't
or
want to
doesn't
do
necessarily do a bunch of
direct
damage.
damage, like okay, you can go and hide, but come back and then help your party, right? Find a spot to hide so you're not being attacked, but come back, buff your party, do something, and then go
Mhm.
and hide again. Like that's, but don't just fuck off and leave your party to like
No.
fight or die all by themselves. Like
Yeah.
that is
That's just not
never,
good. There's a
it's
comment.
never a good thing. It's never a good
Yeah.
look.
There's a comment that I think surmises how I feel about this. I read that ultimately it sounds like the DM struggled with telling them they weren't a good fit. It's tough to reject someone like that, and they absolutely should have done it better. All of these stories are from one person's perspective. We don't get to hear from the paladin and the barbarian. We can't take it for granted that they are crazy or vindictive. Vindictive. Even their second character soloed a boss fight and made sure to sing praises. Does not sound very fun. Like, and this was in response to you weren't kicked out because your character was too secretive. You were kicked because you were constantly doing your own thing. Maybe they handled it poorly, but as a DM, I'm not building campaigns around characters who may or may not participate. It's a bunch of extra work that I don't have time for. Obviously, they didn't read the whole story, and so someone kind of corrected part of that.
Yeah.
But like then, they continued to say how reserved he was in playing. Him claiming he was more inclusive and a team player doesn't mean he actually was, especially considering the complaint was brought up continuously after the change. Now, it is at the end of the day, this isn't everyone sucks, but it's hard for me, especially with how many of
I
these we've
mean,
read, to
yeah.
not see the red flags of your own decision making.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like that's that. I feel like, and interestingly enough, a little bit of a spoiler alert. That might be kind of the theme for today. Is an interesting kind of dichotomy between uh others' decisions and the OP's kind of personal decisions that have led to some of these situations that kind of crop up. But again, I did like this one, especially exactly because of kind of the more like gray nature of this kind of post, where it's just like it's hard to discern exactly who might really be at fault here. But I think I do agree with Sammy. I think probably the most likely is everybody kind of sucked here on some level. I absolutely think that the GM and the other two, or even the other players, did not communicate clearly like they should have. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there was some outside stuff too. If you guys hang out kind of outside of game and stuff too, there may have legitimately been some kind of discomfort or annoyance or frustration outside of game that maybe leaked into the game as well. Like overall, like this, I just liked how this kind of just makes you think a little bit, because it's hard to discern and tell, like there is no real just straight up right or wrong here. It's kind of a myriad of I think a couple of different things that just at the end of the day comes back to, yeah, you just weren't meant for this group. And it's unfortunate, OP, of course, like, but you know, I appreciate the fact that you were, you know, it's you say that you were trying. I hope that that's true. I want to believe that that's true. And if so, then I do wish you luck on your next kind of group that you're going to try and get together with. But yeah,
I think the other red flag to me was the weird the like the whole, and he doesn't like me because I talked to his boyfriend after the sessions for long periods of time. And like you've been playing with them for over a
over a
year,
year, yeah.
and like no offense, but what are you doing to fix that? Either it
yeah,
doesn't sound like you
or
did anything about it. It sounds like you just continued to do it.
if you were aware of it, like did you have a conversation, and then why is that the case? Like if you guys have been playing for a while, like what's
Like there's something else weird then,
yeah,
because no one gets mad about that for
there's
no
clearly
reason.
some other elements going on. So
Oh,
that again,
definitely.
there are definitely, like, again, the cool thing is that you can just see from little parts here or there of how OP put it. Like the vast majority, like Sam said, is very well written, and it's just like, oh, okay. But if you like, you know, pay a little close attention, there are just a little bit of aspects or flags here or there that you can be like, that's a little weird of a thing to say there, or that's kind of a
There's something
strange
off here.
So, but overall, you know, at the end of the day, I think we kind of came down to it. Anything else kind of you got on this one, Sammy?
No, that was. I think that
All right.
nicely summarizes.
Perfect. If that's the case, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. This story is titled "How I Inadeptly Created a Horror Story for My Players" by C Dinner 7738. Yeah, this one is about me, yours truly. I really messed up and created a horror story. First off, I'm not exactly a new GM, so this isn't really forgivable by any means. But let's get to it. I play with 4 other friends, and we have recently started a brand new campaign. However, I have a tendency for overbalancing my games, which means most of my encounters aren't all that difficult to handle. Usually, I give my players more than a few per day to make sure there's a bit of a challenge overall, but, you know, that's always been fine and dandy. However, recently my players asked me if I could maybe make more memorable encounters, you know, encounters that would be really tough and that would really test their mettle. And, you know, I thought that was a fair request. And honestly, improving their experience was something that I really wanted to do. However, these are not the kind of encounters that I usually personally come up with. So I came to Reddit for help. The subs are filled with great advice regarding that sort of thing. Some more nefarious than others, but I didn't really think about that at first. Well, come our session last night, equipped with all my knowledge, the campaign starts. Immediately, they noticed a change in how things were going. Enemies were still relatively similar, but way more nefarious and intelligent, abusing conditions like paralyzed, knocking them prone, then absolutely demolishing them with advantage, etc., etc. I could see their reactions, but I guess I became a bit too engrossed in it. Shitty, I know. Since they were closer to meeting a boss character, they managed to get some long rests in and then proceeded to get to the encounter. However, I had visited Reddit. It wouldn't be a normal encounter, right? Well, I turned action economy to the absolute zenith. Boss wasn't alone, and he himself was an absolute powerhouse. That's when a player went down. And by down, I mean dead. They started to become very agitated, but this only became worse when I went to the next step, which was blatantly stolen from a story in a subreddit here. The boss turns to the cleric of the party and throws a bag at them. It falls just in front of their feet to reveal a ton of diamonds inside. The boss then says straight to the cleric's face, "Bring them back. This is fun." And begins to laugh maniacally.
Yeah.
Well, that's when they absolutely freaked out. I guess I didn't notice their full reactions so far up to this point, but they were not good. We stopped the session with understandably pissed players, and I told them that I was sorry, that was not the reaction I wanted them to have. I apologized profusely, and they somewhat understood where I was coming from and that, I'll tone everything back down now. But yeah, it definitely leaves a bad taste in my mouth to know I created such a bad experience for them. Well, this is my story. Oh, and if any of you guys are reading this, I'm sorry again. I really was just trying to make you all have fun. TLDR, I created a very bad experience for my players by trying to make the game harder as they asked, but instead created just a meat grinder of an adventure.
All right, I'm gonna be real. I'm gonna be real honest here. OP did nothing wrong.
Yeah, I was gonna say I felt like you would. You wouldn't care. It's like honestly,
look, dude,
not the asshole.
I've been through some fucking encounters. Okay,
same.
I feel like I've talked to you about this before about a buddy of mine who ran a false Hydra.
Yeah,
we've talked about how I felt about that. I'm not gonna slander the guy because we've talked about it since, and I love the man. He did a lot of effort. He put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah, I bet he did. False Hydras are hard to run.
The entire thing was very frustrating, and I don't think he quite understood how false Hydras are originally supposed to be run.
Yes.
But what he did was, because we were high level, and because he says this every session, you're gonna die this session, and we never do. But
I know one of my GMs says that a lot too.
He took like a 3 or 4 different false Hydra stat blocks from that he found on the internet.
Yeah, and
just sort of mashed them
together
and gave it abilities that it should not have had. It was difficult, right? But he also had it was being used by a character that was a shadow dragon morphed into a person, like a shadow dragon that could turn into a human.
It polymorphed, yeah.
That was like this mercenary from Skullport. If you know Skullport, like the underground thief city underneath
Waterdeep?
Waterdeep.
I think it's Waterdeep. Yeah.
So this dude was insanely powerful. When he hit you, he would reduce your highest stat by 1 every time he hit you. And like the save was pretty high. So like if you got hit, you started doing worse.
Yeah, you were doing worse and worse, right? Until you would die.
Until either you die or you retreated.
Yeah.
And it was a huge deal. We ended up winning. Like, it was crazy. It was a crazy fight.
Yeah.
And understandably, we were fucking like pissed.
A little pissed.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But that was only because it was almost unfair the way it was being handled.
Yes.
But it was difficult, and not all of it was unfair. The reducing your stat wasn't necessarily unfair. He was very much
if you're higher level characters.
And we had fought him before, and we beat him the other time, and he retreated. And it was like one of those things of like, well,
he came back something more prepared this time. And also,
like, realistically speaking, the Hydra didn't do a lot of damage. It was just the fact that it could fuck with whether or not you could tell what was going on.
Yeah,
that was the hard part.
It messed with your perception.
It would mess with your perception. It would make it really hard to fight the other guy without paying attention to the Hydra.
Far more of a threat. Like,
it was a very difficult fight, and it happened over. It was multiple fights. We fought him in a house, and then he got this item we didn't want him to get, so we had to follow him to another place where he just needed one more item and he had the key to get into it, and I had to like use all my actions on a turn and my action surge to shove a handful of lockpicks into a
lock to keep him from opening it. Yeah, to keep him from opening it.
Just to keep him from being able to just walk over and open it.
Yeah.
It was a bunch of shit. There was a lot of strategery.
I mean, it's tough. it sounds very dynamic, very engaging for
And
certain,
like
but
we killed the
I
Hydra
can
in the first
yeah,
battle,
I can see
and
how it would be very
it
frustrating
was
too,
insane.
though. Yeah.
But like this,
For
because
this,
this, if I was fighting a boss with a party and he was beating our shit in, and then all of a sudden when someone goes down, like dead down, because when someone dies in an encounter, the entire tone shifts
oh,
in
100%.
a game.
100%.
When it's you, it shifts. When it's someone else, it shifts. Like everyone handles it
It's
different,
shit gets
but
reality kind of falls
it
back
gets
into place.
intense. It gets
It gets
really intense.
intense. Yeah, it
And
does.
so to have a boss chuckle and
Chuck,
look over to your group and
throw
throw a thing of diamonds
a
down,
bag of diamonds and
like
says,
this is
bring
fun.
them back.
This is fun. Like, so
Yeah.
I'll put it this way, right? It does two things, in my opinion, to an encounter. One, this encounter is not going to be a TPK.
Yeah, agreed.
The moment he drops those
Yeah, he
diamonds on the
drops
ground,
diamonds. Like I'm
the
like,
moment that
yeah,
happens, this is no longer a TPK encounter.
no,
This is
no.
see if you can kill him or get the fuck out encounter,
Yeah, or run the fuck away.
or this guy is gonna play with you till he's satisfied.
And then
He's gonna
murk
leave.
you.
No, he's gonna leave and come back when you're stronger.
Ah, okay.
That's where
I see
saw
what you're
immediately.
saying.
I saw this guy's
I mean,
toying with you.
yeah, I would say like
Toying with you.
I would say like overall, I personally like I feel like I don't necessarily know if OP maybe did anything wrong since we're still not entirely sure exactly all of the specific like stat blocks or things that he used per se, all the abilities he had. But I do feel OP is being far and away way too hard on himself. Like I don't think OP needs to be like, I do appreciate the fact that he's willing to be so self-aware and like, you know, analyzing. That's amazing. And I love it. OP, if you ever see this, I respect the absolute hell out of you for that. But also there's something to be said. Do not be so hard on yourself, you know? Because here's the thing. Here's the thing that I will point out right away when I read this is like, your players literally asked for this. Okay? Like, I feel like this is like a huge, perfect indicator or a great representation of the whole like saying of like, you don't know what you have until it's gone, right? Where you're just like, I think your players maybe got a little bit too complacent, maybe got a little bit too like, you know, arrogant or too big for their britches where they were just like, hey, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say this to assume like maybe they're acting arrogant or shitty per se. I'm saying that, you know, just in the sense of like, I don't think it's a bad thing at all for them to have asked, like, can you maybe make some encounters a little bit more epic, you know? Instead of maybe if it is a bit more, you know, consistently just the same, like, oh, you know, it's kind of just, yeah, we get a fight and the expectations are always kind of the same. I definitely think once in a while it isn't bad, like for a boss encounter to be something just wild and crazy, you know? Like, to Sammy's point, I loved that. I mean, you know, you took it. I don't know if going to Reddit maybe was the best idea for it because I think there can be some good stuff, but there also are some pretty terrible advice too. But that being the case, I love the whole scene of like, dude throws a bag of diamonds at the party and is like, bring them back. This is fun. Like
I don't know, dude. Like
that's freaking badass, bro. If I was in a party where a nigga fucking did that shit.
Oh my god!
Where this nigga was just like he pulls out a bag of diamonds, drops them at the feet of like our paladin, the cleric, and is like, bring them back.
Dude, I'm sorry, but like
I would be like, that would send shivers up my spine. I'd be like, oh shit.
What creates?
It's like this motherfucker ain't playing around, dude.
What create? Like, I'm sorry, but what would create more of a like of an intense, impactful encounter than like a boss like
allowing you allowing
that
you
would
to
fucking terrify
not even just like heal someone, but to to resurrect them, bro. He's just gonna be like, I'm just gonna kill you all a couple of times, and then yeah, maybe Sam's right, and then dip out, or you know, you guys, whatever. Like either way, I love that. I personally love that. I think that's great and amazing. The fact that only one of them went down, like. And again, we don't even really know what level they were at, right? That is the only thing about this story where it's just like there isn't a lot of specifics on actually what transpired to be able to tell fairly if what happened was fair or just the players maybe, again, overreacting a bit and not really understand, maybe getting a little bit too arrogant or big for their britches, right? For the usual, for what they're used to, because they asked the OP their GM to make fights a bit more intense. And that's not really his forte. He's not great at that himself, and so he was just like, "All right, I'll ask for some advice."
Dude, like that's to me.
And he
Like, I don't
went
know.
for it.
This just doesn't
And
seem like a bad.
I agree. Like I said, I don't think the OP, like again, we don't have enough real information to say whether or not, like, if how badly OP quote unquote messed up, really, or if it is just kind of the players kind of being, a little like, yeah, they effed around, they found out, it's like, be careful what you wish for. I'm at liberty to kind of take OP's perspective on it. It seems like he does feel like maybe he overdid it a bit. Like he took some of the more like, because again, even like the whole aspect of like enemies were way more nefarious. They abused conditions like paralyze and knocking prone and then advantage. It's like, well, certain enemies, if they have that ability, like, yeah, they'll try to abuse it. But again, how did you abuse it? Was it some shit where it was basically just like, oh, you hit them with a weapon and they're just paralyzed now and then you can knock them prone? Like, were there saves involved? Was there any kind of like, because as long as you can balance a situation where you give them an opportunity to get out of it, like either, they get a save for it first. They fail to save, okay, they either get knocked prone or they're paralyzed. They're like paralyzed until the end of their turn or whatever, right? And they can't be like reparalyzed again or something like that if they're hit, right? Or like similarly to like, because if it runs similarly to how like stunning strike can work for like monks, I could see that as getting aggravating, like where it's just
Yeah,
like,
but I mean, there's plenty of monsters
blam,
that have
blam.
things. Like, I was
Well,
talking to a friend.
paralyzed though is also paralyzed is an extra bitch because you just get auto crits if
Yeah,
you hit them.
but like,
Like that's
there's chuls. There's these like big lobster dudes
yeah.
that when they're poisoned into you, you're just paralyzed.
Yep.
And what they do is they grab you first,
Yep.
and then they spray you
And then
with
they spray
acid.
with acid.
You have to
Yeah.
save it, and then if you fail, you're paralyzed. You are in their grasp.
Yep.
So when it comes to their turn next, if your turn's after theirs and you're paralyzed, well, no, it's paralyzed. Well, either way, if you're still paralyzed when it's their turn or their buddy's turn, they can just auto crit you.
Yep.
And they're holding you, so like there's no way you can go anywhere. You're
that is the
paralyzed.
point.
Like,
that is the point of
they're
some of these
tough.
monsters. Like some
They're
monsters
tough.
are designed to be just like they are dangerous.
But
And
like, dude,
if you roll shitty, then you're kind of you are subject to that,
fuck, dude, where did I run? I ran it was like a starting adventure, the Lost Mines of not Lost Mines, no, the layer of Sujishkanth or whatever. Like one of the like it was a preamble adventure in D&D Beyond for a book that was coming out.
Yeah.
And like you're like level 4, level 5 maybe, and they're throwing like 4 of these things at you. They're giant creatures that can grab 2 people
at once and spray them, like,
and spray one of them a turn, and then the other ones
Yeah.
can get their spray and spray someone else. Like
they can also just simply attack with their claw. Like it's I mean, hell, like I recently was in a fight against one monster recently who has the ability to just literally like they throw a ball at you and you have to make like a constitution save, and if you fail, you're just done. You're just incapacitated inside this like this orb prison. And like you can't get out unless someone dispels it or destroys the drone or whatever that you're fighting. Like it's like, it's like there are certain things like that where it's like, yeah, these things are dangerous. You have to be careful. Like, and that's kind of just part of the game. So overall, OP, I'm just gonna say I don't think you did any seemingly from what we're able to see here. I love the fact that you are trying your best to be very, self-aware and critical and, analytical, but I think me and Sam are in agreement. We don't think you did anything actually wrong. Like,
yeah, I don't think you did anything wrong, but what you are doing correct is thinking about this honestly, talking to other people about it, because it's obvious that your party, the people that you play with regularly,
they did not
enjoy
have
this, right?
Yeah.
And you know what? We're assuming that you did all this with no malice. Like obviously from how you're explaining it, there was no inherent malice from you, but the way it may have seemed, especially if this group isn't used to this kind of thing, it may have seemed targeted. It may have seemed a little bit more aggressive than what they're used to. So I want you to understand something. If you did this with no malice, which I assume you did, you said you get a little cut up in it, but that's not a bad thing.
No.
From where I see it, yes, talking to your party and figuring this out was a great choice. So not only do I not think you did anything wrong baseline, you did even better by talking to them and working it
I
out with
think
them.
that was
Because
the best thing. Yeah.
it sounds like your group's not imploded. You still have your group.
Yeah,
You're
since
still
everybody
playing.
was
Like,
still friends, you
so
know.
so you did literally what they asked and then did what they asked again and are checking with other people who have played to make sure that you're not crazy or what you can improve. I don't think you have anything to improve. I think you made every correct
I'm gonna
step.
say, I think you did everything. Honestly, OP, I would love to
This
play
isn't a
with you
horror story at
sometime.
all. This is a glory story,
I
if
would
anything.
love to have you as a GM personally, OP. I thought you did everything right, just like Sammy said. Like you have the biggest thing to always do is you listen. Right now, obviously, it got to a certain point, and it's really unfortunate because I think everybody in the comments also agrees. Like that diamond bag moment was badass as hell. And,
Yeah.
like if it had been in any other situation where that kind of happened, I think it would have been amazing instead of them receiving it the way that they did, which is very unfortunate. But
Yeah.
I
And we're
think
not
you did
alone in
everything great.
this.
Yeah, no,
Because
again,
there's a lot there are a lot of
everybody
comments in
else.
here that are like, this is fucking awesome.
Yeah, this
And
is
then
awesome.
and then there are people who are like, I don't know, if I was in it, I wouldn't like that. And they just like all negative upvotes, or they've all downvotes. I think, there is something that you
Yeah, he has
said. He
all that. Yeah.
responded, I think they were just overwhelmed both emotionally and mentally. I don't think they were prepared for that level of harshness or perverseness. Looking back, the scene might be interesting, but I can only imagine what it does to a player. I might make them feel targeted or feel like it's unfair. Essentially, there was some shouting, some very on the nose complaints. I don't think anyone cried, not in front of me at least, but they were generally upset. I feel like I feel like they asked for in-gaming terms going from normal to hard, and I delivered brutal, which wasn't my intention. Like, I again,
I
the
mean,
dude, the diamond bag move is so good
so
though.
badass. This is so cool.
It's
Like
so
when
good.
I read this, I was like,
Like,
again,
oh damn.
if I had an enemy do that shit to me,
Oh damn.
I would just, dude, and that would be hype as fuck. I would just be like, oh my god, like, and I don't like again this one the one person in the comments who's just like who has a negative comment about the bag thing has 3 down votes. They go like, I would hate the bag of diamonds thing as a player. It just reads, this whole thing is a joke and nothing you do matters. It sounds badass, and in a cinematic and scripted universe, it would be. But in a collaborative storytelling setting, it feels very demeaning to the other storytellers, saying their deaths don't matter. And they have 3 down votes here. And I'm like, yeah, what? That's not what that says at all. Like, he's literally throwing diamonds to you, and he is telling you that like he is ready to murk you all multiple times for the sheer thrill and the potential trauma that it will impose on you guys. Like he's doing it exactly because the deaths matter.
Oh, it's just so
It's so good. Like it's like, oh my goodness. Oh god. Okay. I think we have geeked up enough about this one here. Let's go ahead. Let's move on to the next one. This one is titled "My Last D&D Session Was Utter Bullshit" by some random Abaddon.
Isn't it me now?
Wait, did I do that last one?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I completely forgot. I thought
Yeah,
I got so hyped up about that.
No, I know that was good. We were both very hyped.
Yeah,
I was just listening the whole time.
Yeah, I just got swept away. Yeah, just like.
So you already said the title and everything,
Yep.
but this is my last D&D session was utter bullshit. Before I begin, keep one thing in mind. My group is an old one, 3 years old to be exact, and various coarse humor is common there. We have always been doing drug jokes, sex jokes, dick jokes, etc., and often laugh at one another when someone fucks up big time, me included. So not all of it is some sort of bullying. We kind of work like that, but it does not change the fact that throughout the last week I have had the worst D&D experience in my life, and I really need to scream myself into the void. Also, I'm going to be biased because I just need it right now. So without further ado, let me tell you a story of how my GM's shitty ideas, my party's terrible behavior, and my own honest, horribly stupid decisions have brought me to venting on D&D horror stories. And oh boy, there's a lot to uncover. I like this. I like this honesty right up front.
Yeah,
like, this is probably
no.
biased. This is definitely more of a rant thing. But
no. Again, that's another theme of today's kind of things. Like I liked a lot of this, where people were being very transparent in a lot of ways.
So without the story begins with my party and I being kidnapped by slavers and kept on a ship. Remember, we were level 1 at the time, starting a new campaign. GM'd by an old player who didn't GM for us before.
That's another kind of thing is the whole
Yep.
level one theme
Yep.
of
Yep. Yep. Yep.
today.
Yep. 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 Yep.
I'll
Yep.
never play level one again. I just can't. I
I'll do
can't
it.
do it. I can't.
I was trying to be funny there and ask the rest of the party uh, if they wait. The rest of the
You have to a bit of the structure and
oh
format is not the best. I think English might not be
oh
their
I got it.
first
Okay.
language, but
I
yeah.
was trying to be funny and ask the party if they enjoyed their bread and water. While the DM said, "We get no food whatsoever." Someone else picked on this and said I was probably sucking dicks for food. Not wanting to be a party pooper, I went on with that. That was my first mistake. Of course, I have never heard the end of this, and it's actually ongoing. But if you think being a blowjobber on a slave ship as part of a backstory isn't that bad, don't worry, there's more. The ship obviously crashed, and we obviously ran away. I was a Loxodon sorcerer and took Burning Hands and Fog Cloud as my spells. Fog of Cloud. Yeah, this is definitely not English first language.
Yeah.
That was my second mistake. You get more than 2 spells, bud, don't you? Oh no, level 1.
I mean, well, here's the thing. He's a sorcerer at level one,
Oh yeah, no, I didn't
so
get the 2. Either way.
he gets four.
See,
He gets 4 cantrips though, so you know.
yeah. See, Burning Hands has a 15 feet or 3 hexes of reach. So anytime I was trying to use it, I had to come into the attack distance. It wasn't pretty. I was brought all the way to 0 HP at least 5 times during session 1 and 2, while accidentally giving cover to the enemy team with my fog cloud. My party had a big laugh out of me. But of course, there's more. After the first few battles, the plot came. Turned out we had been pushed 50 years forward by some bullshit magic and at some remote continent. There was a That was a problem for all of us. Our wizard had to find a new contact who knew anything about the magic tower he needed to enter. Our warlock needed to pay 2,700 gold pieces for not doing his contract on time, and our paladin had to contact the grandchildren instead of the son of her family. And I got my whole race slaughtered in a war I was supposed to bring.
Powers and intelligence into.
Powers and intelligence. What the? That's tough.
Yeah, you'll
It's
just
fine.
you'll just have to
I'm
ad lib a
not. I
little
don't want to be.
bit.
Yeah, I don't want. I ad libbed some of that. The
Yeah.
last one got me. Yeah, you heard that right. While the rest of the party got some minor inconveniences, my whole fucking separatist state was genocided, and I was practically the last survivor. Not even a tribe was left on the continent. I guess my GM just decided the backstory of joining a war and leading on a conquest for the sake of independence was lame, and I'm going to have better fun rebuilding my whole country from scratch. Well, he was wrong. Not only was it nothing like that,
Or
like
nothing
what I
like.
wanted to do,
Yeah.
I also had no idea what to do. I was so salty about it. The Dead Sea was pure in comparison.
Was a parfait in comparison.
Yeah, pure. I was assuming what he meant.
Yeah.
But what was done was done. No turning back, and that's where we go into the worst part. See, after my whole race was fucking killed, we went to Helm so our paladin could pray or something. I have chosen to pray as well for the souls of the fallen, and that was when I saw the image of my father and his whole court on pikes sent to me by Shar, goddess of darkness. For some reason, my character was quite pissed about it and called Shar a bitch. She tried to punch me, but she couldn't because it was a Temple of Helm. But apparently, it was enough to make her so fucking livid that she was going to hunt me down and kill me. That's not really how gods work. I don't know. I think that was what happened. This whole sequence was utter bullshit, and I was already so done with this campaign. I was seeing red anyway. But then I did my third mistake. I thought to myself, wait, my country has always been loyal to Saloon, and it was destroyed. I will go to her evil twin sister and make a deal with her. It's going to be so cool, like a corruption arc for dark powers. And I did exactly that. Oh boy, it didn't work. I have somewhat of a silver tongue myself, so I did manage to secure a deal, but it was the most bullshit fucking deal I have ever heard. Shar told me to give her a ring, which not knowing my character also needed for the warlock to pay his debt, and apparently I was not getting any powers or anything from it. It was just a means for Shar to maybe not kill me for calling her a bitch. Something my GM, of course, failed to mention when it was most important. But I have only learned that last part after several hours of fierce arguments with the rest of my party over whether or not it was a bad idea or a good one, with me slowly realizing how deeply I fucked up. I was already so fucking done with that when I got a grievous injury which made me not care about anything and treat the whole world as a joke. I barely fucking noticed. I have chosen I have given psychic damage to myself. My GM only wanted to give me slashing, but this could get my arm cut off. Decide for yourself who fucked up here. I'm a little bit confused on what the fuck just happened out of reading this. But
Yeah.
basically it just means this dude's kind of given up.
Yeah, he's kind of just
It sounds like it's been a lot of adversarial DMing
I
which
mean it would depend.
obviously I don't think
Let's
this guy's attitude doesn't sound great, but this definitely seems adversarial.
well
My
we can
humble
get to we
opinion.
can get to the end and we can
Yeah.
discuss it because
And
I
of
have some
course,
thoughts about it
and
too.
of course there was more. My breaking point came when I finally reached the graveyard where the ring was and tried to pray to Shard to let her know in response. Um
They got hit with magical darkness.
oh yeah, they got hit with magical darkness, couldn't see because I don't know, it's just stupid. Other players were of course laughing at me. It was then when one of them was trying to lead me into a freshly digged grave when I lost it. Um I screamed at him to fuck off, and not even some I'm done kind of scream. But rather, if you do it, I'm throwing hands at you and leaving kind of scream. He let it go. But another stupid thing happened within like 20 minutes. After hearing it's all my fault once again, I lost it and said, fine. Uh,
Next time.
next time I'll come up with a way to further my character. Next time I come up with a way to further my character, I'll keep that to myself. Which I think sent a message on how tired I was with all of it. You may think it's pathetic, but I was on the verge of crying at this point. I heard D&D is a game that can make a grown man cry, but that situation was probably not what this was supposed to mean. I think my party got the idea that I do not have fun, and we had a short but helpful talk about how this whole situation is nothing but fucked up and how I can fix it. I think, or at least hope. GM got the point as well, um, and I can improve this mess on today's session. If not, I will either have the talk with them or try a different character. I considered leaving the table completely already, but I don't think it's actually necessary. My friends are weird, but they are mature people. We will try to salvage this mess and see from there. Anyway, thank you for reading my rambling. I have a session today. I hope it will improve. If not, at least you get part 2 of this shitstorm. Peace out. I hope to never be here again. Um,
So
I do want to say this. I get I I get the sense that one, this DM doesn't know how to be is being a bit adversarial. I think what started
well
as a table, I honestly do, based on what he's saying. Uh,
well yeah, well, you
I
know.
do think what started out as a lighthearted, oh look at the fuck up this guy made, I think, at some point turned into maybe the rest of the group reveling in the misfortune, and that can happen very quickly and not on purpose.
Yeah, very
And
easily,
it
but
can
not,
really hurt. It really can hurt the
yeah.
individual, make them feel ostracized.
Yeah.
It seems like the breaking point, the yelling, the getting out of character for a moment and actually being like, hey, what the fuck
Yeah, fuck
is
off. Like
this?
all like
This is making
yeah.
me feel like garbage, was the moment that I think they needed.
Yes.
Because you know what?
I
Sometimes that's what it needs.
Oh, I mean, I was gonna
Sometimes that's what it
say, I
needs.
think a
It's
lot
happened
of
in
the
my games before.
I think a lot of the time actually it's kind of what it needs to just like for a moment just break the immersion real
Hmm.
quick to just be like, "Hey, I am not having fun with this, or I'm not really liking this. Can we like adjust or something like?" So when I first read this story, like to me, like I went through this as well, and it's like here's the thing, I feel like the top voted comment down below I think says a lot of really nice stuff. I don't agree with everything they've said, but let's hear what they have to say. So top voted commenter says, first of all, I agree that this sounds like a very frustrating game to play in, and I think the GM made some decisions that probably could have been discussed beforehand, but it seems likely he was just trying to set up interesting stories and drama and went considerably overboard with it and might have inadvertently singled you out a bit. Still, I think it's important to remember that it's a game played and written by flawed people, and things aren't always going to go perfectly. And it's important to know how calmly to talk it over to resolve issues instead of resorting to yelling. I'm wondering if your group's culture of laughing at each other when they fuck up is ultimately making your game worse. Throughout your story, you say a lot of times you messed up or made stupid decisions. I don't think any of those decisions were stupid. I think it's important to remember that bad outcomes in games aren't a result of your personal failings, and maybe that mentality is partly contributing to why you got more upset than you really needed to. So there's more of it, but even just with that, like right away, one thing I will say, I absolutely agree that I don't think the GM was intentionally trying to be hostile or antagonistic to OP necessarily, but more so in the sense of just like, for one, I do agree. I think the GM made a mistake in that they vastly altered OP's whole backstory and therefore motivation and everything with the whole jumping ahead in time. That particular trope, I'm not a huge fan of, because that again, it has the potential to do exactly that. Like, unless you speak with your players beforehand and you are like making them aware that this is what's going to happen, it is often incredibly difficult. Not impossible. I think there are absolutely some instances where you could make this work really well, but a lot of the time it'll be incredibly difficult to just spring this on your players and for this to be good, really. Because their entire backstories almost become completely null and void. It just doesn't really matter at that point, really. And that kind of sucks, especially if you didn't talk to them about it beforehand, where you were just like, I just sprung this on you, surprise! Like, that's often not a great look. But in this sense, I will say it did seem like the GM, I think, had a legitimate desire to like provide OP's character with still some cool stuff, where it's just like, oh, hey, you now have a chance to like, recreate your country and to go on this quest to repopulate your people, or even to maybe find out if some of your people survived, like if they didn't all just die. Maybe some of them were secreted away or went into hiding or something against Shar.
Well, yeah, that's also one thing. Like, there probably were people who survived, but I get that, like, the daunting.
No, but I also agree. Like, that the biggest aspect of that though was that the GM did not talk about that with OP, and that wasn't the type of game or the type of story OP wanted to tell with their character, and that is the most important part. Even if the GM's intentions weren't bad, I still think it wasn't the best move, or wasn't really okay of them to do this without consulting OP first, because it has this exact opportunity, or this exact potential for this, where they're just like, well, that is not the game or the story I wanted to tell for this character. And it's like, yeah, that is shitty. So I feel like that's where the GM is kind of messing up a lot. I will say, like, after that though, the commenter also says that they don't feel like the OP messed up at all. I would disagree. I do agree. I think the OP did make a number of kind of bad decisions, like, and they were just mistakes and they were bad decisions. And I don't think it was okay at all for the rest of the party to just start dogpiling them and like bagging on them for just making some bad decisions. But I will also say, I think the only one that I really say was a bad one is, I mean, well, obviously, I guess maybe I should say the only two. You chose a sorcerer at level 1. I mean, you get what you get at that point.
Hey.
Like, let's be honest. I'm just saying.
Hey.
Just saying.
We've gotten through our sorcerer slander.
Hey.
We have to at least respect people picking a class and wanting to play it.
It's not slander if
it's
the
slander.
truth.
It is slander.
Not
I can't wait.
It's the truth.
I'm really, really excited if the new stuff comes out and Ranger is the worst class again, so that sorcerer can finally take its rightful place.
Oh, right, Ranger
really
is
middle of the road.
Ranger is most likely still going to be the worst class, unfortunately.
I think because Ranger now is not the worst class. I've made some pretty fucking great Rangers.
I mean, yeah, you can make some great Rangers for sure.
Multicast, of course.
But no, see, that caveat doesn't count. They're not pure Rangers, Sammy.
Hey, just to the left and down from my name, or from my face.
Oh, I'm aware. Yeah. And so therefore you have no right to advocate for Rangers if you can't ever just go pure Ranger. Why don't you go pure Magic Archer?
I did pure Ranger. My second. Okay. No, was it my second or? It was my second character in Curse of Strahd.
They died.
Was a pure.
They died.
Yeah, they did, but not
they
because they were a bad character.
Oh, okay, sure.
It was what's the Gloomstalker? It was a Gloomstalker Ranger.
That's great. Love Gloomstalker.
I had some of the best.
See, people think those are broken. In fact,
I had some of the best damage of the party.
Absolutely,
it was a greatly written character. He died doing what he should have been doing. It was that moment of an old man's wiseness only goes so far. So
it's a great ending.
Story. He deserved to die. I made a mistake as a player, and it's Curse of Strahd. So when you make a mistake, you get punished for it.
You'll get pretty badly punished for it.
Just so happened that death was my punishment.
Well,
we remember Yannick. We pray for him in his afterlife. He was a great guy.
Always remember. Never forget Yannick.
He was fantastic. He was great.
All right. There you go. See that? Okay, in that sense, the Ranger probably still won't be the worst. Then, like, I think they definitely made Sorcerer a bit better.
I'm super terrified, dude.
They definitely made Sorcerer a bit better. I don't know. I think
Dude, all my build ideas are gonna be fucked.
maybe even better now, maybe because the way they're also changing spells is different now too, though, for everybody. So it's like they're switching up just baseline spell kind of mechanics now in terms of like prepping spells. So I don't think I don't think sorcerer or bard anymore are restricted to just
Okay.
the spells you get, or at least they might be, or maybe everybody. I forget the exact specifics on it, but either way, it's no longer affected like by your intelligence modifier or wisdom modifier. I think anymore for like preparing spells.
Preparing spells was always your spellcasting modifier.
Yeah, and it's not anymore. So I think it's your proficiency bonus now, maybe.
Oh, so it's just as you scale up, even if you're not necessarily as great. Oh, you know what? That's good for me as a person that often builds multi-classes where my second class has spellcasting.
That was
not my main. That was the whole
stat. That was the whole point. Is for it helps for like multicasting and that you no longer have to worry as much now about having to dip too much in one or other stat to get.
You're telling me they're buffing my favorite thing, which is making
I
stupid multiclasses.
I think they might just be Sammy. But back to the matter at hand. We went off on a little bit of a thing here. Point being is with this, I do think that the OP made some personal bad decisions and mistakes on like, you know, what, like, first off, I don't like, one thing I will say too about the GM, you're in a temple of Helm. It doesn't make any sense if you're praying to Helm that all of a sudden Shar can send you visions of like trauma and horror in a temple dedicated to a completely different deity who was actually supposed to protect about that sort of thing, as well as the fact you weren't praying to Shar. You're praying to Helm, or maybe even Selûne. That thing right there is like, that's kind of dumb. Okay, but I won't say Shar showed you images of that. You called her a bitch. Like, that's fair. That's not a stupid thing your character would do. Yeah, you can curse Shar. That's perfectly fine. And maybe Shar might get pissed off and send some assassins after you. I don't think she would do it just because you called her a bitch. So many people over the vast, infinite time have called her far worse. And she doesn't give a crap about them. Like, the only time I would say maybe she would send assassins after you is because of your direct relation to a country she wanted to wipe out, who was dedicated to her sister, Selûne, who she hates. This whole thing is actually very similar, spoiler alert for those of you, I guess, who haven't seen it yet, to the Baldur's Gate 3, Shadowheart quest line. Like, super similar to that, where she might send assassins after you because of that, not necessarily because you called her a bitch. Like, that's not something she would probably care about. I will say, though, then it is an absolutely, in my opinion, ridiculous decision to make, to be like, you know what? This evil dark goddess who murdered my entire people, or seemingly tries to, and wants to now murder me, I'm going to betray my goddess who's protected my people and who my people have worshipped for generations, to then go make a deal with this goddess who also hates me and wants to kill me. I don't know where that came from. I'm going to be honest with you. I have no idea. And so at that point, if you're going to do that, I don't see the way Shar treats you. Why wouldn't she? She is the goddess of, like, I will ask too, OP. I don't know if you're familiar with like Faerunian pantheon in terms of like the gods and stuff, but like Shar, along with Lolth, like they're two of like the worst kind of goddesses out there in a lot of ways. Yeah, Shar 100% would screw with you and fuck with you and has no obligation or desire to really help you. She will use you for her own ends and even revel in making the entire experience worse for you. She'll do that to even her most devoted followers, for God's sakes. Like, she really doesn't give a fuck. Like, so the way that the GM treats you as Shar, I feel like is completely in character for Shar. Like, I can't really see, like, because you also made it. I just don't understand why are you trying to turn to Shar, who clearly has done all, like, why instead didn't you go to maybe try to help Selûne? Pray to Selûne for power to seek righteous retribution against the horrible atrocities committed against your people. You said before that you wanted to engage in like a liberation war effort, right, for your people. So where did this whole arc come from? I'm so confused. Like, if anything, I'd be like, you maybe pray to a different dark god then for power to get revenge against Char. But why are you going to the person directly responsible, most likely, the being directly responsible for all of your pain and suffering or whatever? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And so at this point, when you're sitting literally praying to her to be like, oh, she sent me on this mission that actually turns out she wasn't even going to give me anything good from it. In fact, it also actively interferes with another party member's quest as well. Like, I will say again, that is 100% something the goddess Shar would do to you. Like, whether or not the GM is hostile, dislikes you, likes you, if they're playing Shar correctly, she would absolutely do that. That is 100% what she would do to anybody.
Oh yeah, like that's the reality as well. It's like,
and so
what sucks is like how the gods acted is not necessarily wrong, but I do want to preface heavily in agreeing with what you said before, which is the fact that in no way, shape, or form should in a temple of Helm is that the correct, like,
no. Again, the GM definitely has made some mistakes here, I would say. I understand. Again, I think the GM obviously was trying to, again, establish some drama and some personal, like, conflict and motivation in the character. But again, is not understanding where OP was already at or what OP was wanting to do. And so they're trying to railroad or force kind of a thing here. And so I think it's like they did it poorly. Where again, it's kind of just like, yeah, like I don't really understand a lot of the decisions that the OP made either. Like, in terms of like constantly going up, like, okay, they chose for 2 spells, Burning Hands and Fog Cloud. First off, Fog Cloud, I'm pretty sure, is a concentration spell. So if you end up getting downed at any point, the Fog Cloud would go away. So your enemies wouldn't benefit from the Fog Cloud if they knock you out. Like, that's not how that would work, to the best of my knowledge. Using Burning Hands, like, why did you have to get into combat range for that every single time, or melee range for that every single time? You could still, it's 15-foot cone, meaning you don't have to get right up on a dude. I understand if maybe you're like, I can get maybe 3 or 4 of them if I get right up next to them, but if you are literally getting like focus fired and downed every time you do that, maybe stop doing that. Maybe sacrifice the most optimal like thing for play for, hey, the most optimal thing now is for me to get this damage on less of them, but keep myself up so I don't go down. Like, I also don't, like, again, you're a sorcerer. You have the lowest hit die of anybody except for the wizard. So you are not supposed to be getting up close and personal if you can handle it, unless you have a decent AC or some other contingency. So, I mean, again, it's like, if you're making those decisions, like, you got to learn and adapt. If you're going down literally 5 times over the course of 2 sessions, like, switch something up, my dude. You have 4 cantrips for a reason. You have Firebolt. Technically at level 1 you wouldn't have sorcery points, so yeah, you're garbage still. But it's like you have a cantrip, fire off. Like, the rest of your party probably is only doing 1 action per turn as well. 1 attack. You have a D10. That's gonna be one of the best you got for Firebolt, or if you use Ray of Frost, whatever. Like you have some options there. Not a lot. Level 1 sucks. I will never do it again. I don't know why anybody ever does, but there are definitely options for you. And so, like, it's difficult for me to feel like all of I can absolutely understand OP's frustration, because there were things that were done. Like, the GM did make some mistakes for certain. I also do not like at all just the general vibe of the table in terms of them dogpiling on each other for like mistakes. If somebody fucks up, but it's not a fuck up that they're like intending to do, like where they know they could fuck up, but they're legitimately trying to do something, and they either roll poorly or whatever, or it's like something happens that they couldn't necessarily have foreseen. It is a shitty feeling for people to be like, stupid idiot, like that. That doesn't feel good.
No,
like
it sucks.
That is a bad, in my opinion, it's a bad mentality to have. Again, if it's something that you as a player know is a dumb decision to make, but you're like, I'm doing it for the lulz, I'm doing it for the laughs, I'm doing it for the meme, and you do it anyway, and then you fail. then that's fair game. That's funny because you did it on purpose, right? It was like you knew that this could probably result in some stupid whatever, but you did it anyway and accepting that. That's one thing. It's another thing if like, yeah, you're trying to do something and again, you did make some bad decisions consistently so. It didn't really make a lot of sense, but
Yeah.
I don't think people should dogpile on you and rub that in your face even more. Like if your character was like, I'm gonna go and try to kiss up or dedicate myself to Shar now, my character would have been like, what? Wait, what? Why? Isn't she responsible again for like the genocide of your people, for the death of all of your people? Like, why would you want? Why? What? That doesn't make sense. Don't you want to get vengeance on her at least? If you want to go down a dark path, why wouldn't you want to take her out? Like, you know, if you don't believe in Saluna anymore, okay, ask freaking who's like a decent god of vengeance or something. Ask like Tempest, who's a god of like destruction or something. You know, like ask like maybe even Bane, maybe. You know, for the Black Hand. Like I don't know if he and Shar are allies or not. Actually, I'm not sure, but
I don't think they are.
they might not be because Shar I don't think is really allied with anybody because she kind of hates everybody, but is also she's powerful enough to kind of hate everybody. But there are plenty of others. There are plenty of other gods where you could take that and just be like vengeance or whatever.
Vengeance
for Gotham. Justice for Gotham. Dude, that is one of my favorite memes ever, where he's just going to town on some poor fuck, and Robin's like, hey man, I think you got him. And he's like, you want what he's having? Gotham. Nah, he's like, that's what I thought. Justice for Gotham. He just keeps going.
So dumb.
He's just
so fucking stupid.
He's just tuning up some jaywalker or something. Damn it, I love those so much.
Oh
but that,
God.
all right. But that in the case, again, OP, kind of closing statements. Again, I appreciate the fact that at the end of it all, though, you guys really did have an active discussion. I want you at this point, though, to just take a second, you know, take a breath, kind of look inward at yourself. What did you want initially for this game, right? You said you wanted to have kind of a liberation kind of story or whatever for your people. Talk to your GM about that. You know, specifically talk with him and ask him like, hey, this is initially the story that I wanted to tell with this character. After this whole thing here, I think a lot of your decisions after this were heavily influenced by your frustration and like the surprise of it all, where you're just like, I don't even know what to do. Like, what do I, and you were frustrated and a bit, and that you didn't really have maybe a clear head. So maybe just take a second, reset back to center and just have an open conversation. It seems like you already have with the GM a bit, but I'm just saying, like, you know, just in case, just really kind of hit the thing home with everybody. You know, everybody seemed to have like taken a second to reset and realize you weren't having fun and were able to like do it or whatever. Like, just, you know, just communicate out of game, not in game. Don't keep trying to settle it or solve it or fix it in game at this point. Just take a second out of game and go from there. And I think you guys will be all right. But yeah, with that, let's go ahead. Let's move on to the next story of the day. I believe this will probably be our last one of the day. This is titled First Time DMing by Dragoon in Pie. So I'd like to start this out by saying this was a learning experience for me and that all the people I played with stayed friends. I realized I did a lot of things wrong as a GM, but God, was it 7 sessions of stilted, boring, non-engagement with everything I tried to do. I'm keeping everything vague as I don't want my friends to realize that I am bitching about them. Castless, me, the GM. There was role player, there was obligated, there was enthusiastic, there was disinterested, and then there was normal 1 and normal 2. So to start out with a bit of preface, I got asked to DM one night while hanging out with obligated and enthusiastic. I said I had played D&D 5e for about a year, but then quit to begin writing gigs for a cyberpunk campaign. And I said I could swing D&D, but it probably wouldn't be as good as my cyberpunk stuff. This was accepted by enthusiastic, and obligated went along with it because of enthusiastic. I asked what type of campaign Enthusiastic was thinking of playing, and they said Feywild because they had been watching Legends of Avernus. I
Wow.
said, cool. I got a base idea right now, and I'll write something up when I get home. Interesting that it's Feywild, but it's called Legends of Avernus. So I went home.
No. He was just watching a live play,
Oh,
and so he was interested in trying stuff out because he'd been watching live play stuff.
gotcha. Okay, I wasn't familiar with Legends of Avernus. I thought it was some kind of like not like
Is it
module or
Avernus or
something.
Avant? Because I know of I learned Legends of Avantris, but I don't know Legends of
I was gonna
Avernus.
say like it might be Avantris because Avernus is the
Avantris has
first
gotten really
layer.
popular lately, so I was
Yeah,
assuming it
I
was
was
going
gonna
to be
say
that.
I've heard of Legends of Avantris, but I haven't heard of Legends of Avernus because Avernus is the first layer of hell. So I'm like,
I mean, it sounds like a good time though.
I mean, but it's definitely not Feywild though. I said, cool. I got a base idea right now, and I'll write something up when I get home. So I went home, wrote a general Feywild plot of meeting Archfey, making deals with strange creatures, and finding a way home. Simple plot, simple solution. So later on the day of D&D night, I meet Enthusiastic's partner, Disinterested. I would also meet Roleplayer, who I later became good friends with as I enjoy them as a person and a player. I would also meet Normal 1 and Normal 2, who are also partners. Disinterested had been regaling me with stories of their characters' stats, abilities, so on and so forth, rather than stories of their gameplay or experience. I simply thought, okay, a min-maxer. Might have to throw a few more enemies at them then. So we finally get to a session 0 at Disinterested's family's house, and it's going well so far, as I generally let them make characters on their own, with the help of Roleplayer guiding both Normal 1 and Normal 2, and while Obligated kind of guided Enthusiastic. This is where I made my first mistake. Since everyone but Roleplayer and Disinterested were brand new, and with the fact that they would all be in the Feywild, I didn't think a backstory was necessarily needed to be written. I thought with some creative NPCs and letting the creature or the creative juices flow from the players over time that they could develop a nice character. I was so wrong. If you are a GM, require at least 1 to 2 paragraphs of story or at least a page. So we get to the first session at Obligated's house where I prefer to hang out and have sessions at. So I wrote what I would like to consider a decent plot. Everyone meets up around a player. They meet a strange archfey who wants a MacGuffin. They obtain said MacGuffin, make some deals with the archfey for a legendary gift, and get given the grand quest line. So the idea was that they learn that they must learn from this archfey's family. Weird sentence. So that they learn that they have to then learn from this archfey's family how to use the legendary gift to get home. Here's how it went. Session 1. So we begin with Obligated, as they had a character that was home to the Feywilds. It made sense for people to gather around his camp. Enthusiastic comes in and describes their character great and is generally playing as themselves. Their entrance was good. Roleplayer then came in with Stride and with a nice religious character. Their entrance was smooth. Then we get to Disinterested, which is where the red flags begin that I should have seen. The entire time that everyone was describing how they arrived, they were on their phone, not giving me nor any other players the respect that they deserved. Then they ended up using the wrong character from a campaign that had ended over 3 months ago instead of the one we decided on for this campaign. At least that's what I assumed. This I simply chalked up to as sometimes it happens. It will be fine. We get to Normal 1, who was new to the game, so I understood the difficulty. I had to very much do a lot of describing different ways to get there and let them pick a path. Then we get to Normal 2, who for a solid minute could not utter a word. I ended up trying to do the same thing I did with Normal 1, but they would not pick a choice I provided. So I ended up just having them appear magically. I felt disheartened because I was describing how generally anything could make you appear in the Feywilds, and I felt that Normal 2 just wasn't listening to a single word I was saying to them. This would then set the tone for the rest of the campaign, although it did get slightly better. Session 2 was more of the same. Roleplayer attempted to roleplay and tried to give other players jumping off points. Enthusiastic was generally oblivious to the fact that half the group was unable to do half the game. Obligated understood the game quickly and played a character that kind of kept to themselves, and Disinterested did not care about anything I said and would only perk up or engage if I mentioned loot, shops, or combat. Normal 1 and 2 attempted to roleplay, but it came out very stilted. They would end up being silent for most of the campaign. And I assumed that if I kept the story coming and playing interesting characters, that they would eventually perk up and things would change. But I only ever had half the players engaged or interested. And it just kind of sucked. I realized also that I kept kitty gloves on when I should have taken them off. They had been exploring a goblin cave and decided to long rest inside of it, which they hadn't actually cleared out. And I didn't have the heart to just kill them off as it was only session 2. Well, I mean, if they're all level 1, I don't think you should just kill them off because they long rested inside a goblin cave. Like you could maybe send an encounter at them. Either way. Later on, they meet another adventuring party, and I realize now, although I was playing them as smart adventurers who have been in the Feywild enough to realize things. Oh, again, weird sentence structure. And I realize now that although I was playing them as smart adventurers who have been in the Feywild enough to realize things, shouldn't be a period there, they probably weren't whimsical enough to be interesting for my players, and that was on me as a GM. I don't think that that's the problem. They would later get to a town where I amped up the whimsy, seeing as that was what was interesting, and still crickets. There you go. I made the town a bit weird, with strange colors over every building. I said in my mind, it's okay. I still have the general plot to work with. I just need one of them to ask about the colors. See, that's another thing too, where it's just like you can't bank on players doing something to make something happen for the plot. Like you kind of gotta. I had to ask them after the session to engage more with the plot. They treated the town like a Skyrim item shop. I will say that was my fault, as I couldn't name items off the top of my head, but I still would try to have the NPC barter over the item. I had accidentally given 2 random low-paying quests that I assumed no one would take over the 500 GP quest. That was wrong. This would all culminate in a 3-way party split combat. That was what broke me finally as a GM for D&D. That fight took 2 hours, and one parent of Enthusiastic joined, which I was already breaking as a GM, so I said, fuck it, we ball. I also forgot to mention that this was at Enthusiastic's parents' house, where one of the parents hated Obligated, and if we mentioned their real name, it would probably become a huge fight. What? Oh, and the parent played as a red dragon, and I didn't want to deny them, as they already bought dice and a dragon figurine. Oh yeah, and Disinterested, who hadn't cared about a damn thing the whole campaign, had the gall to tell me how to run combat, like running a 3-way combat was easy for any kind of GM, let alone a brand new GM. Okay. Another thing was that Obligated and Enthusiastic played extremely horny characters. Great. Enthusiastic's character was also overtly sexually designed by them. This got very old very fast. I'm totally fine with having a brothel or things like that in-game, but not 24/7 sexualization of NPCs. Later, Obligated would make a successful roll against an archfey to seduce him, and I let it fade to black. I would also like to mention that this was a gay romance. Okay, I don't know why that's relevant. Then Normal 2 and Enthusiastic began making sexual remarks about Obligated's character. I should have shut it down, but being new, I had no idea what to do. Role player would later mention to me that it made them uncomfortable too. We are both open to either sex, so it was very effed up with that in mind. I would later converse with role player about the situation, as I had been running Cyberpunk Red for their friend group and absolutely loving the gigs. I realized that I hadn't felt like a player too, just an answer machine with NPC responses. Disinterested just showed extreme disrespect for me as a GM, and probably their last GM too. And Normal 1 and 2, I realized, just wouldn't be able to get into D&D as they were, well, too normal. Enthusiastic is on the autistic spectrum and cannot read human emotions well, so I felt bad for them. Obligated as well. Obligated was, well, they're out of obligation for Enthusiastic, and role player tried their best. Overall, I at least learned a lot about GMing and have settled comfortably into a Cyberpunk Red group where I don't need to worry about wearing gloves. I guess what I learned was to make sure that the people you are playing with want to engage with your story. Oh, and not to do random quests if you want your party to stick together. Also, use lines and veils instead of hard line with sexual themes. End post. So... Yeah. So
Sounds fun.
this is to me like again kind of a similar thing. I feel like like I don't really understand some of the things OP is saying because OP says that they have played D&D for a year. They stopped though, so that they could then start like GMing for Cyberpunk Red games, which is like okay, so you're not new to GMing then. You've GM'd Cyberpunk stuff. So you're not entirely new to the whole concept of what it means to be a GM. So I don't really understand a lot of what this whole like not knowing what to do when people start kind of acting a little, strange, weird, uncomfortable, or awkward, whatever. Like a lot of this just seemed it's like you're like I could understand maybe not having as much knowledge or understanding maybe of the rules potentially since you took a bit of a break or whatever.
Yeah.
But in terms of just GMing style of like getting people engaged or whatever in the story, that has nothing to do with the mechanics. That's just like it. I feel like maybe it's just maybe you weren't necessarily a new GM, but maybe you just never had a party who just half of them weren't interested in playing the game the way that you liked or whatever. And two of them, I guess, yeah, maybe just were very socially kind of inept or awkward. And so they didn't really know how to engage with this thing. They didn't have much of an interest, really. Disinterested does kind of seem like a legitimate maybe problem player, and that yeah maybe they're a bit too interested in only just the mechanics of the game and not anything else. And yeah, I agree, it is rather disrespectful just to be on your phone like the entire time not paying any attention, you know to anything to anything that's going on or happening. Like I'm not a huge fan of that.
No, like
um but it is also like, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say this is a horror story, as it's kind of just, I can see why you might feel frustrated, OP, but also it's like most of these people were brand new players. Like they had never played this before. And you have played before. Plus, you're also a GM with some experience, at least with Cyberpunk, maybe not D&D, but the overall issues of this are more so that it's just like it seems, and to be fair though, you do acknowledge that. You do acknowledge that it's just like, normal one and two, are they weren't really able to get into D&D because they're apparently too normal, which is like, sure. I don't know if I would use the term normal, but yeah, like they just, it wasn't their thing. That happens. It is what it is. And enthusiastic, maybe a bit too enthusiastic, and obligated was only there out of an obligation, which I find kind of strange. I don't know why. Like, did obligation tell you that? Like, I don't know why you're assuming obligation was there just for enthusiastic. But either way, this whole thing. What do you think, Sammy? Like,
I don't know. Like this is a weird one for me because, well, one, I don't have like the experience in that like game itself,
yeah.
but it just seems like a lot of like I don't know. I mean, give me just seems a little bit like this person might not know what they want, or
Well, I don't. Yeah. Well, from how they even set up the game, where they're just like, this is how this is all working and stuff like that. It's like, well, like again, I can absolutely like for what happened with kind of like normal one and normal two when you were trying to like introduce their characters and get them like, if normal two literally just did not say words for like a full minute trying to like figure like, yes, that would be frustrating. I would feel super frustrated by that too. I'm not gonna lie. If you give them like a ton of options or decisions, and the only thing that they're just not making any real decisions about anything, that would be exceedingly frustrating to me. It would be. It would just literally be like, just pick something, anything at all. Just you have these options here, 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 here. Like
yeah,
any of them. Literally, it does not matter. Just any like something. Just make a decision. Like that would fuck me up. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not even gonna lie. I would be unreasonably pissed off at that too. If I was trying to do this thing and they were just like, oh, like literally the fucking scene from SpongeBob where Squidward asks Patrick if he wants like fries or pickles or whatever on his sandwich. He just sits there going like, oh, for like who knows how long, right? Like that would just grate on me. But that's my own thing though too. Like I acknowledge like that's a personal intolerance that I have. Because it's true, like if they're brand new, you know, they're not used to it, and maybe this isn't their thing, and they're, you know, whatever. And so you kind of have to have a little bit more patience and understanding. But I also agree. I think there is a limit. There's a limit to that, where that person is like, you just have to try something. Just do something. Okay. You have to try something. So I get your frustration with that. I get your frustration with disinterested. With enthusiastic, you know, you had role player who apparently was nice and they were good. You had enthusiastic who was at least enthusiastic. You know, it's like maybe they were a bit too enthusiastic, but you can also just, that's where your GMing chops kind of come into play, right? Where you're like, all right, hey, just, you know, let's maybe just let's kind of relax about that, so long as everybody is okay with it. You know, I mean, hell, I feel like you should have established that from the beginning, right? Do you not establish like in the beginning of your Cyberpunk games, like what's kind of some of the lines and veils that your players are comfortable with? Did you have a session 0 at all with these people to like,
yeah, it's like what's expected, what's not expected.
like that's just normal for any TTRPG. It doesn't matter what TTRPG you're playing. It's literally just a normal thing to be like, hey, so here's the idea that I had. Here's kind of the basic premise or the vibe and the theme of the campaign. Like, you know, whatever. Like, you know, what's everybody feeling? Does anybody have any triggers, any lines, any, you know, whatever? Like that's a normal thing everybody does in any TTRPG game. So it's, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe OP hasn't ever GM'd. Even Cyberpunk at that time, maybe he was just writing gigs for it. Maybe he had never actually run any games with his Cyberpunk stuff at that time either. I don't know. That could be the case, maybe. At which point, yeah, maybe he was a brand new GM and he just didn't have quite the same kind of expectations or patience or tolerance and understanding of what it, you know, of being a GM. Yeah, I think kind of the comment down here says it pretty good as well. They're like, sorry to hear that. It sounds like it was really frustrating. It's nice that you were able to learn a lot from this. Don't blame yourself too much. You just had a very disinterested group. The part where players were on their phones, didn't have any backstory, and hardly played really hit home for me. I GM'd for a group for a while back, and I invited 8 players as several people just had awful FOMO, or fear of missing out. I figured I'd leave it to those players to decline, but they all decided to give it a shot, which was fine by me. To keep it brief, 4 of the players had a blast, and we still play this day. The other half was super disinterested. I would reach out and say things like, hey, are you still into this? It's okay to not be interested. I won't be offended. But they insisted that they wanted to keep playing. I get last-minute cancellations, super late players, no-shows, people on their phones, or people hardly playing unless it was their turn in combat, or people interrupting with complete nonsense, all that good stuff. I tried my best to engage them, but it almost felt like they wanted me to just play their characters for them. As I said before, it really felt like these players just had a fear of missing out, and they clearly didn't like D&D, and I knew this when inviting them, but they just wanted to be there for the sake of being there. I eventually booted these players out. It's a tough call to make, especially if you're friends with those players, but it could really make a huge difference. And I think that is a great representation and showcase of like, yeah, I think I've said this a little bit too. And like, again, from my experience, I've also been in campaigns where like, it feels like a lot of people are just there to be there. They're not there to actually take part in this activity or this hobby. Like it's either fear of missing out, or they're just like, I just want to have a social interaction with my friends or whatever, which is still a form of fear of missing out. But it's like that. If we are doing this here, if we have made the plan and the schedule to do this activity, can we please just do this activity? Because this activity is not easy. It can't just happen willy-nilly for the most part.
Yeah,
like
no, not really.
It's really something that requires planning and coordinating and you know, scheduling prior. So that, you know, that is the truth of it, where it's like, I think a lot of people do just kind of maybe play the game because they either heard a lot of things about it or their friends are really excited about it. And they're just like, oh, well, you know, and they're just there like, I don't really like this. And it's like, but then they're just like, oh, no, I want to play. I want to be here. But it's just like, but you're not playing. You're not actually here. You're not doing this. Like you clearly don't. So stop lying about it. Look, I get it. we can just find some other time to do something else. We can find another time to go see a movie or get a drink or something, whatever. But like, don't say you want to be here and then not show up, whether you actually physically are there or not. Be present. Like,
Yeah, it's the bare minimum you could do.
yeah, it's just unfortunate. I'm sorry that you had to go through that kind of experience, Jim. It is. I can definitely say I understand the frustration, but I would also say like it hopefully, like you said, was a very educational experience for you in terms of what it really means to be a GM. But with that, unless Sam, you have anything else, I think then we got it. I think that's the last one we have for the day for you all. We appreciate you so much. If you stuck with us this far, we love y'all. We hope you enjoyed. Again, please be sure to like and comment the video, subscribe and share the channel. Helps us out immensely. And we will be sure to catch you guys next time when we dive back down into the archives. So long.